So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this colloquium of Professor Oliver Hohlfeld. It's my great pleasure to introduce him, and I'd like to read his short bio here. Oliver Hohlfeld is professor at the University of Kassel, where he heads the Distributed Systems Group. Before, he was a professor at Brandenburg University of Technology and headed the Computer Networks Group there. Prior to that, Professor Hohlfeld was at RWTH Aachen University, and before that, he was with Anja Feldmann at TU Berlin or Deutsche Telekom Innovation Laboratories. He was a visiting scholar at the group of Paul Barford at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the US, and he studied computer science at Darmstadt University of Applied Sciences, Institut Eurocom in Sophia Antipolis, France, and Darmstadt University of Technology, and he holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science. From 2004 to 2006, Oliver Hohlfeld worked at Fraunhofer IGD, where he focused on developing network architectures for telemedical applications. And he obtained a PhD from TU Berlin in 2013 with advisor Anja Feldmann, and he is also senior member of the ACM. And his talk will be about distributed denial of service attacks and pooter services, what's in the DDoS jar. Looking very much forward to this exciting talk. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Hohlfeld.
Yeah, thank you very much, Klaus, for the very kind introduction. It's my great pleasure to be here today. So this talk is about one topic that I really like. It's about measuring cyber attacks. A few different words about me. So if I were to describe myself, like I like hoarding data. I like measuring stuff. So I'm an empirical person. In terms of the research that we do, a lot of the research in my group is based on internet measurements. That means we try to take together like large amounts of data about how the internet is currently performing, how it's developing, and then draw conclusions out of that. And one particular application domain of these measurement studies is internet measurements, where we can observe attacks and the effects of attacks in the wild. In this regard, what we're doing in the group is we have an internet observatory. That's our platform for kind of measuring everything. That's the NetRay Internet Observatory. And if I were to describe myself, like my home is my castle, my home is the internet, and maybe as Klaus already mentioned, I think like one step in my CV that was really important to kind of fostering my research was I was a member at Deutsche Telekom Labs, and I have a very dedication to practical things. I want to change how the internet engineering works, and I have kind of I'm kind of deeply rooted into the fact of how internet systems are built and operated. So internet operation is one of my favorite topics. As Klaus mentioned, I was moving a bit around Germany. So before coming to Kassel, my previous university was in Cottbus, that is close to the Polish border. And in Cottbus, we have one nice area, which is the Spreewald. So here you have the river Spree, and this is then fanning out in like lots of these small channels. It's really nice. It looks kind of nice. You can rent a canoe. And go around with a boat. As in the group, like we did a couple of retreats with the group where we did do canoeing. This is like a really pleasant area. But of course, there's like one natural danger to that. And I guess like if I show you such an image, it's kind of easy to say or to see like what could be the natural danger to that. Flooding, yes, of course. So if you build your house next to a river, and if the water levels are rising, this is kind of a natural threat to the house, so to the infrastructure that you're building, right? And you might now say that, well, of course, this is crystal clear. Like if I showed you the picture, and like everyone who builds a house next to a river should be aware and should kind of know that, okay, I'm subject to flooding. So I'm subject to a flooding attack. It's very easy for us to see it in this kind of environment. In the internet, this is maybe not that clear. Like if you deploy a service in the internet, it's not that clear that you can be subject to the very same attack, which is flooding. And for people that are deploying internet infrastructures, you know, that's sometimes, maybe nowadays it shouldn't be a surprise anymore, but to some it maybe is. So this is like, besides ransomware, what you're seeing here, flooding, is to me like the #1 cybersecurity threat next to ransomware that we are currently facing in the internet. In the internet, these flooding attacks, there's of course not a water level that is rising, but you're flooded with traffic. So that means you deploy a system in the internet and the attacker is sending you a huge amount of traffic that you didn't ask for, and that is like filling up your pipes up to the point where your system is no longer be able to provide, you know, meaningful responses to your customer base. This is the flooding attack that we are subject to in the internet, and in the internet these attacks are called distributed denial of service attacks. And if you're reading a bit into the news, then you see that all the big internet infrastructures were victims in the past by these attacks. So Amazon AWS was hit by a massive scale attack of 2.3 terabits. Google was hit by DDoS attacks. MasterCard was taken down. Visa was being attacked. And then if you go on, then, okay, DDoS attacks are now a natural weapon in cyber attacks between countries. So that's cyber warfare. And it's like these kind of DDoS flooding attacks have become like the #1 thing for attacking victims. And what makes these attacks like kind of specifically peculiar is normally if you're becoming the victim of a cyber attack, you typically have done something wrong. You have clicked on the wrong link in an email and then malware gets installed on your computer. Or you didn't update your system, or you did something else wrong. DDoS cyber attacks are, to me, like the only kind of cyber attack where the victim, by nature, didn't do anything wrong. So you're not being hit by a cyber attack because you didn't update your system. And you can't defend against it by installing a firewall or installing a Windows patch or whatever. You can then do everything nicely and still someone else is flooding your pipes with traffic that you didn't ask for. That's kind of the one thing that makes these DDoS attacks kind of super peculiar and super harmful. So we decided that, okay, well, we need to get active in that space. We need a better understanding of these DDoS attacks, and ultimately we need better protection mechanisms against that. And what I'm showing you here is the outcome of a project that we had together with one of the largest internet exchange points in the world. This is the DKIX R&D team. So we had a joint project together to develop a better DDoS detection mechanism. And one thing that I want to particularly outline here is that out of this collaboration, almost all of the work that I'm going to show you in this talk is joint work with my former PhD student, Daniel Kopp, whom you see here on the left. So he defended his thesis on DDoS attacks in November last year, so about a year ago. And so Daniel was the key contributor in the work that I'm going to show you next. So what happens in these attacks? Let's say we have an attacker and we have a victim. That could be, for example, the University of Klagenfurt here. And the attacker now says, well, it's a wonderful day to take down the university, maybe because there is going to be an online exam that I don't like, or for whatever reason. And then, of course, the attacker could send attack traffic directly to the victim, which would probably be not a very good idea, because then to the victim it's kind of obvious maybe where the traffic is coming from, and so the attacker could do something about it. What typically happens is that you're not sending the traffic directly, but you reflect it via other infrastructure. And this is kind of legitimate standard infrastructure like your DNS servers, time servers in the internet, and so on. So this is standard services. They're just abused for the attack. So the attacker is sending a packet with a spoofed source address to these services. Let's say a DNS service, like, oh, resolve this name for me. And then what the attacker does, it spoofs the source IP address. So instead of sending the IP packet with the real source address of the attacker enters the source address of the victim. And so then your server in the internet receives this response and says that, oh, the University of Klagenfurt, so someone in the University of Klagenfurt is trying to resolve this name, or is asking for the current time, or whatever it is. And then what the service will do is it will happily answer this request. That means it will send traffic to the victim. And that creates now an interesting situation where the victim is receiving traffic from legitimate internet infrastructures. And I'm emphasizing that because these internet infrastructures are not the ones that you want to block, right? This here is your DNS servers, time services. This is critical infrastructure that you need for normal internet operation. So you don't want to block these. You don't want to block traffic from these, which is like one of the big problems for like detecting and defending against these kind of attacks. Now, what the attacker now achieved is it reflected the traffic to the victim. So the victim doesn't see the nature of the attacker anymore, but it only sees traffic from a normal internet service. But now the attacker can do one more thing. The attacker can scale out. Instead of just using one DNS or one time server, the attacker can now use a lot of these servers and use them to reflect traffic. And if you do that with quite a number of these servers, this attack becomes really powerful. That means there is now a really high amount of traffic being directed towards the victim. And this is creating this flooding attack. So now the pipe that connects the victim to the outside internet is now flooded with incoming traffic that this victim has never ever asked for. So this is a particular harmful situation. And the detection becomes like really hard because of two things. If we look at this scenario here on the left-hand side, we can clearly say like, oh, this is unwanted. We don't want this traffic. But on the other hand, there might be situations where you have flash crowd effects. Let's say there's the online info week for the bachelor degree or for the master degree, and you hope that there's a lot of traffic from internet users outside towards the university. So that can create a similar looking situation, but this is clearly wanted traffic. And so now to differentiate between the unwanted scenario and the wanted flash crowd scenario is not that easy, but there are standard technical solutions that you can buy from the big internet hyperscalers. Okay. Let's start to look into like how we can perform DDoS attacks. You might want to say now, wow, to kind of launch these attacks, I need to be a skilled attacker. So I need a lot of technical expertise to launch this. Well, maybe, but what if you don't have this technical expertise? What are you doing then? You want to do something, you lack the expertise. The first thing is that you probably start Googling for it, right? Or now maybe nowadays you ask ChatGPT, but you ask some sort of an online service. Now you could do this and simply ask, okay, ask for DDoS for hire service. And then you get a response, actually quite a lot of responses. And then what these responses are leading you towards is so-called DDoS for hire services, or they are also called booter services. And then if you click then on these websites, you see websites like this. Websites that advertise themselves as stress testers, or they say finding new ways to fix old problems. So the advertisement here says that this is absolutely, we're just a stress testing platform, only with the caveat we don't check who is actually being stress tested, if that's really the customer that is asking for the stress test, or if you're stress testing someone else. This kind of if statement is omitted here, but it's absolutely no big deal. It's just a stress testing website. And then if you go on, it's like really nice looking. So they have 24/7 support, and they have even a stop button. Isn't that nice? So these are the kind of websites that you will see, and I guess it's kind of safe to show this image here because this is a booter service that was taken down by the FBI, so it no longer exists. So now the next thing that you might wonder is like, wow, this looks amazing, but it's probably going to be expensive, right? Well, what's your feeling? Like, how expensive is that stuff to pay for an attack?
$25 a month.
Yeah, exactly. This is cheap. This is damn cheap. It's a few bucks, and then you get an attack, right? So now the next question is like, okay, is this just scam? Is it like you're paying for it, but you don't get a DDoS attack in response? Or does it really work? So Daniel was testing this out to test if these platforms really deliver what they promise. And what he was doing, Daniel was attacking his own infrastructure, so a measurement autonomous system that Daniel was setting up. And here's the result. So what you see here is two kind of attacks that Daniel has performed in blue and in red here. These are using two different attack vectors, one with the NTP time protocol and one with memcached, which is a popular caching service for databases and online APIs. And what you see here on the x-axis is the time progressing from left to right. And on the y-axis, you see the attack traffic volume in gigabits. And what you see here is that once you press the start button in this web interface, attack traffic starts to hit the victim's interface almost immediately. So there's an almost immediate start of this attack. Once you press the stop button, there is a controlled stop where the attack traffic is falling off. What you're seeing here is like, this is a very cheap attack. This was not a really expensive attack. So you pay for it, and you get an attack. So these services do actually deliver on what they promise. Now, I don't know how the University of Klagenfurt is connected to the internet. Our university in Kassel is connected with 10 gigabits. So you see that here, if you pay a few bucks, it's sufficient to take down at least our university. This is, of course, nothing that I should publicly say, so please don't try this at home, but this is really harmful. Everyone can do that. You don't need technical expertise for this. You just need to use these online services, pay with a few bitcoins, and then that's it. You get these attacks. And so 10 gigabits is like a particular problem. If you ask like experts in the internet, like we have here in the room, Bernd Spies, then people would say that, yeah, but connecting with less than 100 gigabits, it's grob fahrlässig. So this is nothing that you should really do, right? And that's exactly because of this danger of DDoS attacks. So it kind of works. And of course, we're not the only ones who knows that that works. So the booter service that I showed you in the very beginning was taken down by by law enforcement, so in an effort led by the FBI and the Dutch police and so on. And then what we did was we were studying the effects of this law enforcement with the question of like, do law enforcement efforts really reduce the harm of these kind of DDoS attacks? So we measured the DDoS attack landscape in the internet before and after this takedown of 15 of the what the police claim to be largest booter services in the world. And what we observed was nothing. So there was no lasting impact of these FBI takedowns on these attacks. So this is maybe a little bit of a discouraging message, but that means also we need to do more to get rid of this DDoS problem, right? So let's start to look into how the properties of these attacks really look like. And for that, we need to obtain measurements. So we need to look into the anatomy of these kind of DDoS attacks. And now what we are doing here is we are measuring DDoS attacks in the core of the internet. What do I mean by core of the internet? Let's first look into what internet really means. It's two parts of this word, inter-networking. So the internet is a network of networks. So you have, for example, the University of Kassel network, and these networks meet at exchange points. So this could be, for example, internet exchanges. And there you have one infrastructure where a lot of these networks that are active in the internet meet and exchange traffic. So that means that's kind of also a natural observation point to look into the properties of DDoS attacks, like really in the core of the internet. So that's what we did. So we looked at two DDoS attacks in the core of the internet, so that meaning at a major IXP, and what we observed was thousands of attacks every single day. So this is not, a seldom problem. This is a constant problem. You could even say that now, DDoS attacks are kind of part of the classical internet background radiation that we have. It's like if you connect something to the internet, expect it to be DOSed at some point. Now let's start zooming into these attacks. Like, what kind of attack vectors are being used here? What I'm showing you here is a plot that on the x-axis shows the protocol that was used for, or app used for reflection. And here on the y-axis, you see the number of attacks that are using this threat vector. And this is ordered by frequency. So you see that 90% or close to 90% of the attacks that we observed, they were using the three protocols that are highlighted here in this circle. And these are classical attack vectors. The network time protocol, DNS, and CLDAP. And what is particularly interesting about is that some of these attack vectors are known for more than 10 years. So since more than 10 years, we know the problem with DNS, and we also know the problem with NTP. And we also know how this problem with NTP can be solved. This is a solution that is known for long, and still NTP is the #1 abused protocol for launching DDoS attacks in the internet. So it's kind of an attack vector known for more than 10 years, and it's still like the bread and butter protocol for launching these attacks. So you kind of think that, well, this shouldn't really be the case, right? But it is. So we have a lot of these attacks. Most of these attacks are using classical protocols to attack them, like NTP, but of course there's also new protocols coming up. Now let's zoom into a little bit more, and let's focus on the word attack. Because you could ask yourself that, okay, you're talking about attacks all the time, but actually what is an attack? And if you think about this question a little bit, then this is actually something that is really hard to answer, because defining what an attack is surprisingly hard. Why is this hard? Because we have no clear definition of when an attack starts and stops. That might sound weird, right? But let's take, for example, the example of our studies at core internet infrastructure. Is the start of an attack once we see the first byte of an attack at this internet exchange point? Maybe not, because the routing in the internet might have changed, right? Maybe the attack started earlier, just the route in the internet, so the path taken has changed, and this is just the first time that we see this ongoing attack. The same might be true for stopping the attack. Maybe, we no longer see traffic, but the reason why this traffic is absent could also be because the route has changed or other effects. So depending where your vantage point is, so that means from where you make these observations in the internet, these properties completely change. And this has a big effect on, studies that look into DDoS attacks. There are lots of studies, including ours. They report statistics about attacks, the number of attacks, typical durations, and this sort of things. But of course, it's not that easy to define if you really observe the entire attack. And then you could say that, okay, well, what if I'm the victim? So I'm being targeted. I should see the start and stop of the attack, right? Yeah, but what if, the first bytes or whatever of the attack traffic were filtered away, and then the filtering no longer works or whatever, and then you start seeing the attack. So it becomes very unclear when an attack really starts and when it stops. The same goes for the attack volume. So in the beginning, I showed you this newspaper article with impressive traffic figures in terabits and so on. But it's also like surprisingly hard to reason about the attack volume. Why is that? Let's assume the university is connected via 100 gigabit pipe, and you receive 1 terabit of attack traffic. If you look here on campus, you would see that, we constantly receive 100 gigabits of traffic. And the overflow traffic, the overflowing 900 gigabits are just dropped. What is then the size of the attack? From the perspective of the university network as a vantage point, it would be, we were hit by a 100 gig attack because that filled our 100 gig pipe. In reality, the attack traffic was much larger. So even defining the true volume of an attack is hard because overflow traffic can get lost on the way. So these are all super hard questions, and it gets more tricky if we look into new kind of attacking trends. So here I'm showing you a plot. So again, time progresses from the left to the right, and here you have the attack traffic rate. So what you're observing here is 2 bursts of traffic. Here's attack traffic coming in, and here's attack traffic coming in. Now, question to you, how many attacks do you see?
Maybe 1, maybe 2.
Yeah, maybe 1, maybe 2. It's hard, right? Why is that? It's one of these favorite pictures where it's like, how much do you see? Why is that so hard? And again, here the answer to that is internet routing. So let's say we have the following routing setup. So you're observing the traffic here. You have your observation point, your vantage point here. In the first part, the attack traffic takes the route via your observation point. And then the path in the internet changes because BGP recomputed, and then the traffic takes a different route, meaning that the attack is still ongoing, just at your observation point, you don't see it, right? And then at some point, the routing changes again. You see the attack vector again, and then it's here. So in reality, this could be just one ongoing attack, but you don't see the part here because of a routing change. So that means in order to analyze DDoS attack patterns, you need to also deeply look into other infrastructural properties of the internet, including the routing paths that are being taken. If you do that, and if you exclude the fact that these cases where you see an interruption of traffic hitting you because of routing changes, you get to a very interesting and new attack pattern, and this is called pulse wave attacks. So that means instead of like continuously flooding the victim with traffic, you attack the victim in very short but high intensity pulses of traffic. Why would you want to do that? Because you make the traffic pulses so short that the mitigation systems that the victim is running are not kicking in, right? The attack impulse is too short for the mitigation systems to react. And that's your goal. And what you're seeing here is like, this is a real world pulse wave attack that we observed in the internet. So you see these short, high intensive DDoS traffic pulses. And then, yeah, if you zoom in, you see that for a short amount of time, a large amount of traffic is being pushed towards the victim's network. And of course, to be damn sure that this is not the effect of rerouting, you need to combine this traffic analysis with a detailed analysis of BGP, so of the internet routing protocol. So that's kind of a new kid on the block that we see in DDoS attack patterns. And if we look then into the data, we see hundreds. This is not thousands, but we see hundreds of these pulse wave attacks at a major internet exchange point. So what we have learned so far is that DDoS is like a standard, or has become a standard thing in the internet. The bulk of this traffic, of this attack traffic, is abusing protocols and attack vectors that should have long been closed. But still, and the question is now, okay, so what should we do about this? One thing that you can do is like you subscribe to the big hyperscalers and say that, hey, dear Akamai, please give me DDoS protection. Or the other question, you start to filter the attack traffic quite early in the core of the internet. That means these places where you have really high bandwidth available and before it actually hits the victim's network. And that was what we were doing in this project together with DKIX. We were implementing and building such an AI-based DDoS detection system that can run in the internet's core. Now, this is a particularly challenging problem because first of all, you would say that, okay, why is this challenging? It's challenging for two reasons. It's first of all, if you do anything with AI, you need good labeled data, right? As kind of training data. Here, this is super hard. There is no such thing as good training data for DDoS attacks because somebody needs to, manually or whatever, dig these attacks out of the traffic volumes that you're capturing, and you can't do this at scale. So first of all, becoming the training data is a problem. And then the other problem is that because of internet routing asymmetries, you always typically observe parts of the traffic, but not the complete attack traffic. And this is something that is typically very tricky for AI systems, so that you know that something will be missing, or most likely missing, but you don't know what will be missing. So those were the two big challenges, beginning with the training data. We looked into then solutions for that. So how do we do that? What we used here is we looked into black holing traffic. That means black holing traffic is traffic where the receiving networks explicitly signal to the IXP, please drop traffic. This can be for any reason. That might be because the system or the AS is under attack. It could also be because for we are upgrading something, please don't send traffic to us. It can be multiple reasons. So a black holing traffic is an interesting signal, but this is not a clear label that you can use to identify DDoS traffic, because black holing traffic clearly contains attack traffic, but not solely attack traffic. It just simplifies the problem that you have to look at less traffic. So we need to do more. And what we did was then we have a probabilistic model. So we looked at a model that is fairly popular in economics, that is association rule mining. That means find probabilistic patterns in the data where if this and that typically happens, then black holing is the outcome. So it's like, these typical patterns that you use in economics, find customers or find the properties of customers that always buy this particular product or whatever. For us, we're not looking for a product, we're looking for the effect traffic is being black holed. And then we're looking for the patterns that lead to this. So what this generates is the first stage of our AI pipeline, which provides rules in the end. Rules that very much look like firewall filtering rules. These rules are not, complete in the sense that you want to automatically deploy this at an internet infrastructure, but it's like a pre-filter to the data. It largely narrows down the search space. Now then, the second challenge that we looked into was no internet system wants to mount a black box into their network. Just imagine the case that, okay, you sell like a fancy AI box from someone, rack mounted into your ISP, and then at some time, when there's Super Bowl ongoing or whatever, or a new release of Call of Duty, this AI black box thinks that, oh, this is so much traffic, I've never seen that much traffic before, this must be an attack, so please stop this. And then, boom, your customers will complain massively. Nobody, like no sane operator ever wants to have such a thing in its network. So you need to involve the operators. You need to design an ML system that is designed with a human-in-the-loop approach. And that's what we are doing here. So after these rules are being produced by rule mining here from the data set, they are presented to operators in kind of a user interface in the platform. And then the operators need to go over these rules and explicitly enable them. And look into that, oh, that might make sense. Like there's NTP being selected, but I'm not running an NTP service in my network. So clearly everything that is NTP based must be related to DDoS attacks, so I can safely enable this. Or you could say that, oh, I'm operating a massive amount of NTP servers. They're really popular. This rule, if I enable it, it will probably lead to a lot of false positives. I don't want to enable this. So this freedom is here given to the operators in this web user interface. And that's a critical human-in-the-loop step that we designed here. And then from these rules, we go into the second stage of our ML pipeline. And here we aggregate the traffic by target. And the second stage here is now using ML models that are trying to answer the question, is the target under attack? So given from the rules and given from the traffic patterns, do I think the target is under attack? Yes or no? If yes, then afterwards you could take decisions. A decision could be, and this is then also up to the operator, drop the traffic, alert, create an alert, whatever you want. So that's kind of the system that we built. We published this at SIGCOMM 22. And DKIX is currently putting this into production, so this will be in their platform at some point. All right, now what we're dealing with here is like what I've shown you so far is a system that runs at one IXP. So that means you see part of the attack traffic. So if we look at this set of reflectors that we have seen early on, then attack traffic towards a target can take very many different paths in the internet, and the amount of traffic that goes through a single IXP is most likely be a limited set or a partial set of the entire attack traffic. So that opens the question on what are different observations point observing about an DDoS attack in the network. And this was a question that we looked into here. And the final answer is like not everything can be fully observed. The big challenge, and that's also the big challenge into designing these mitigation systems, we are always limited by data. So now we try to make this problem visible. And this was like a collaboration with a lot of people in the internet industry, including big hyperscalers, Akamai, and other data providers, to have like a really massive view on DDoS attacks from different vantage points in the internet. And this is, I think, also the paper that has the most authors that I've ever contributed to. So what we're seeing here is this. So on the y-axis, we have different vantage points. So we have IXP blackhauling. We have two different large-scale network telescopes. We have Akamai Prolexic. This is a commercial DDoS mitigation server. We have NetScout, which is NetScout Atlas. So this is also a big commercial DDoS infrastructure, and so on. And what we're looking here into is direct path attack and reflection attacks. So two different kind of DDoS attacks. This is being displayed here over the course of a few years. And what you see here in this heat map in colors is the normalized number of attacks. The details here don't really matter. The key point or the key takeaway of this image is if you compare the different data sets, so the different vantage points in this image, the colors look different. So that means different vantage points in the internet observe different parts of an attack. And if we zoom in, this becomes very visible. So this is a DDoS attack against a major CDN network seen from multiple CDNs. So here you have one IXP located in Central Europe. Here you have one IXP in North America and another one, a smaller one, also in Central Europe. It's the same attack. It's the same timescale. So these plots here are lined. But what you see is like different infrastructures see different shares of the attack. So that means the absolute attack volume that you see kind of differs by the infrastructure. And that, of course, makes it hard to work with thresholds, for example. You cannot simply say that, yeah, if I see more than this amount of traffic, then it's most likely be an attack, because that largely depends on routing properties, so how much of the attack is actually flowing through the vantage point that you're currently looking at. That makes it also very hard for these, in particular, the smaller places to detect these kind of attacks. But now the question that this opens is that, well, if only all of these infrastructures were to collaborate. So if they would exchange a little bit of data, this would help these smaller exchange points here, where they typically see, for some attacks, insufficient attack traffic volumes to activate a mitigation to kind of detect those. So if attack traffic information would be shared between them, also the smaller places could say that, oh, I'm hardly observing this attack, but through our joint information base, we know that this is an ongoing attack, so we can also mitigate this. And this was then the second system that we were building, or the proposal that we were making, a paper at CCS. What if we built a DDoS data exchange point? Similar to we have the idea where we have internet exchange points where networks can meet to exchange data, and the volume of the economic value of an IXP increases with the amount of member networks that are contributing to this exchange point. Here we have a DDoS exchange point where member ASs can share information about ongoing attacks. And it's the same economical principle that applies to IXPs. The more members this has, the more valuable it is. And also the higher the value for the individual members that are contributing to this, right? So if you know that this is the place, the go-to place, the big DDoS exchange hub, and just you go there and you get the most accurate information about currently ongoing DDoS attacks, then you have probably a pretty high economic incentive to kind of become a member of this place as well. So we kind of evaluated this, like what is the impact that such an exchange point can have, and I'm showing you the effects of this here. So what we see here on the x-axis is a number of different internet exchange points. They are sorted from the smallest ones to the largest ones in our data set. So we have here a fairly big IXP in Central Europe, a fairly big IXP in North America, and a quite small IXP in Southern Europe. What you see on the y-axis is the amount of detectable DDoS traffic. So, and then you see two bars. This one here, the shaded one, this is local detection. That means if you only detect with the local traffic information that is available at this IXP without collaborating with anyone else. That means that, of course, for the small IXP, you probably only see like a small portion of the attack traffic, and that means like, yeah, the big DDoS attacks that are passing through this infrastructure, they are kind of easily detectable, but a lot of the smaller attacks where you only observe insufficient traffic volumes, they are hard to attack, so you miss them out. However, if you start to collaborate with the other IXPs in our data set via such a DDoS exchange point, you ramp up your detection threshold to close to 100%. It's not exactly 100%. There's always stuff that you miss out, but it's fairly close to 100%. So this is a big boost for small IXPs. This is kind of now the pattern that you see. Now let's look at larger IXPs. So here again, the size of the IXPs in sense of the members increases from the left to the right. If we then look into this picture here, you see that if you compare the ratio of this dashed bar with the global detection, you see that this is going up the larger an IXP becomes. That means for the very large infrastructures, they don't really benefit from this exchange, right? They observe so much traffic, they don't really benefit. But all of the smaller IXPs, they benefit a lot from such an infrastructure. That's quite an interesting takeaway. All right, so that's a proposal for such a system. And what we can see as a takeaway is like DDoS is a massive problem in the current internet. It's surprising because like DDoS is the only cybersecurity problem where the victim didn't do anything wrong. The other thing that we are observing that the attack landscape is changing. So we see new kids on the block like pulse wave attacks, but these old legacy attack vectors, they remain stable for such a long time that it's surprising that this still happens. Solutions exist to filter DDoS traffic before it actually arrives your network, so you can subscribe to a big hyperscaler or use such a mitigation system as the one that we have been working on. And with that, I'm at the end of my talk, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for an interesting talk. I'm sure there are several questions. Who wants to start?
Farsad.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I found that there are two main questions related to the DDoS. The first one is detecting the attack, and the second one could be the mitigating one.
Yeah.
Imagine that we are under attack. Okay, we found that there is an attack. What should we do? Is it dropping the connection, or? Sorry, question.
So the best solution would be that you're a member of an IXP that lets you to black hole the traffic, such that you could tell someone else to please drop traffic towards this destination IP address, such that your pipe that is connecting your network to the internet is not flooded with this kind of stuff.
And maybe we receive that traffic from another us.
Yeah, maybe to give a comment. So first, if you detect it, then you already did something very good, because then you have a monitoring in place which informs you.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that there are many players out there who have no clue why the internet stops working, and we talk about ISP size. Yeah, so have a monitoring, you see your attack, then congratulations, you did something very correct already. The problem is if this is now coming in and you have detected it and you don't have a book or an emergency procedure to execute, then congrats, you did everything wrong, because then you're done. Yeah, in that moment, I guarantee you, you can't do anything. You can just let it go. So the topic is you need to be prepared. So detect the thing and make active measurements against it, yeah, to have any idea what to do. So that could be a starting point. Yeah, so this is a process, yeah, and you need to prepare things like Oliver mentioned, have DDoS black hole mechanism in place, or rerouting or whitewashing machineries or things like that.
Okay, any other questions?
There are two here in the front.
Yeah, thanks again for your presentation. My question is like, we know that network programmability is getting popular. So in future, if the network infrastructure is replaced by the network programmability, so do you have any information how network programmability can help to mitigate this kind of DOS attack? Because programmability means we can put our custom logic to the switch or router, how the packet processing.
That's a hard question. So if you ask for my honest opinion, not a lot. If you look into the body of research that has been published, is because SDN and P4 is quite a hot topic. A lot of people have looked into, and there's lots of papers that propose solutions to detecting these kind of attacks in the switch. These solutions are kind of effective in the single switch solution and so on. It's like they make a nice case for like, okay, what's the minimum logic that we can still put into a Tofino switch to run these detections? But it's of course like a fundamentally hard problem. Why is this a fundamentally hard problem? Because first of all, you need to scale out. ASs are typically large. That means you need to coordinate not just a single switch, but a large amount of switches. And then the problem is not really the logic that runs in the switch. So the problem is not really the logic that you would put into P4 to run on your Tofino switch. The problem is like, how do you deal with detecting these DDoS attacks in the first place in terms of identifying them, deciding what to do about them, like at what point do you mitigate. If you mitigate too early, customers might be unhappy. If you, in particular, if you have a lot of false positives and so on. This is a fundamentally hard question of how you automate this. And I would say it's not really a question of the execution platform. This is not an bring P4 to the rescue kind of problem. The problem is the higher layer problem of when do you detect it? At what point are you certain enough that this is an attack that I want to mitigate? And how do you coordinate this over a large set of infrastructures? So in that regard, like P4 can be part of a technical solution. I think it's like entirely unrealistic that this is the entire sole solution to kind of fight the problem. You had another question.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether the collaboration between Internet Service Exchange points actually also helps in detecting botnets and taking them down because of the aggregation of the data that's being collected.
That's a good question because I guess like this is a bit more tricky to detect command and control traffic because this is not typically at a high volume. I don't, on the spot, I don't have a good answer to that. I would need to think about it a bit.
Thank you for the very nice presentation. I have two questions actually. The first one is, as some people probably know, I like to draw networks generally like a graph, and you have your networks, you have your nodes, and you have your edges. And now we basically focus on the idea that we have these target nodes which we
Right.
attack from a certain node. But how about the network itself? How about the edges? Are there also attacks where the connections are actually attacked? For example, we could apply a certain load on some certain node that leads BGP then to redirect traffic. If we do that from multiple points, we could manipulate and miggle around with traffic, how it's getting routed on a bigger scale, and this could be used as some kind of leverage. Are there some kind of attacks, or is that probably some kind of idea from myself?
Short answer, I don't know. I would speculate that this exists. Long answer, yes, we were wondering about the same. For us, it's like our direct visibility was inside of IXPs. We couldn't look into other infrastructures. And so what we did was we looked into the effects of these DDoS attacks on the overall forwarding platform of the IXP. So in other words, is this attacked traffic really, and does it create a harm to the overall platform? So could you attack the IXP by, launching such kind of DDoS attacks? And here the answer is like, no, the IXPs that we looked into are so well over-provisioned that there's no effect. Bernd?
Yeah, to comment on that, the IXPs are not reachable on layer 3. So the IXP always stay invisible on layer 2. So the IXP does only switch packet from one member to the next one. And if the port of a member blows up and is fully occupied, the IXP don't care, because then you just have a full port and the member is down. But the IXP itself is not reachable on the internet at all. So no, you can't bring it down because it is a switch, a high-performance switch routed in ASIC. So no, you can't attack this one. At least not the IXP. If we talk about other things, collateral damages in ISP parts or whatever, yes, of course, there can be happening a lot.
Great talk, thank you very much. So in the image and video encryption, so there are people that are actively working on designing new attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So also here, are there people are working on new attacks, or what are the characteristics of attacks? It's only classified by the volume of the attack, or there are some patterns, or?
No, there's a lot of patterns of emerging attacks. Like pulse wave is one of the. It's not super new, but it's the kind of the new kid on the block. Then it's also, there are new attacks, or OpenVPN, for example, is abused as an attack vector now increasingly. So we looked into this during the COVID pandemic. Are VPN endpoints being attacked? Because this would be an easy way to create harm. We haven't observed this. We also back then haven't observed like OpenVPN to be really abused as a reflecting protocol. But then in later days, we actually see that, yeah, there's traffic where OpenVPN is actually being used as kind of a new amplification protocol. So that there is change in this attack landscape, but I would say the change is slow. And I guess like part of the reason is that you know, that these legacy protocols where we know the solutions or the fixes for so long, they still work. That's regarding the protocols. If you then look into the attack patterns, then you see all sorts of creative things. Like we observe these carpet bombing attacks, and attacks where an attacker starts to sweep over the network. So you start with one IP address, move to the next one, move to the next one, move to the next one in a prefix, and then start all over again. All of these fancy attack patterns become visible once you start really digging into the data. So it's like, yes, attackers become creative with that, but the legacy thing is just like use the legacy protocols and just bombard the victim with traffic. And that's because it still works so well.
Okay. Yeah, I have a quick question to your AI-based detection system, right? Or your AI-based model that you used. You had a human in the loop, right? So that means before every traffic was blocked, being forwarded, a person needs to acknowledge that, right? But did you use the data that was collected until that timestamp or until that time when the person acknowledged for learning, so for continuously learning or training your model?
No, that's just like the first filtering step. And the first filtering step has the particular focus of like looking at a large volume of data is impossible for a human to do. So what this associative rule mining does, it largely narrows down the search space. So instead of like terabytes of data, you just have to look now at 100 rules or whatever that are proposed by the system. So these are, you can review them quickly if you're a bit skilled in like 20 minutes or something. This is something that can quickly being done, and we wanted, so this was an explicit design philosophy that we had, like we wanted to put the human network operators into full control over what is happening.
Okay, yeah. And maybe just a very quick question regarding these traditional protocols like NTP and DNS.
Yeah.
So what is the reason why they are not fixed in many nodes?
I don't know. Ask the operators. Honestly speaking, with DNS it's super hard. With NTP it's easy to kind of mitigate the attack vector.
You mentioned the amplification attacks, and one of the countermeasures is BCP38. Do you know at which rate or at which scale it's deployed in the wild, and how much it is deployed at your IXP or IXPs?
No.
Bernd?
Okay. All right, so any other questions? One more.
Sorry, one more comment. Just to give the answer on, or one potential answer on this question of NTP traffic, my interpretation would be it requires knowledge on the configuration. Our problem in this industry is, and this is great why so many young people are here, we need more skilled people and young people who follow this with a good education, because all the seniors have left the field. They are now AI engineers or whatever fancy job roles, but we don't have good people on the networking side. So please come and fix this problem. We need more knowledge. Then it will hopefully be gone.
Thank you. Okay, so I think with this, let's thank the speaker again. And thank you all very much for coming to this colloquium. Have a nice evening.